Guten Abend, good evening, my dear friends. Доброго вечера. Operator Starsky here, together with DW Phillips, my special guest during this stream. We will be talking about a lot of different things. First of all, we will of course talk about the Kyiv of Mine, which is absolutely amazing documentary. Those series, some of them are already available on YouTube, and we will talk about this. But first of all, dear friends and family there in the chat, it's so good to see you as always. And also, we have our army of moderators, Ali and Newman, and also the operator Starsky's very personal FSB agent there in the chat. Always happy to see you too. Also, Kaimo and Texas Mofo. Oh my God, so cool to see you as well. DW, welcome to my channel. I'm so happy to see you, and actually I was anticipating this stream for quite a while, I must say. Can you tell us just a bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, the most important thing I have to say is I'm a happy man today because I'm on your stream. And Starsky, I've been watching you for a long time, as well as many Americans. I'm broadcasting to you today from the state of Texas in the United States of America. I wish I was in Ukraine again. I hope to be back soon. My background is this. I am a filmmaker. I am a journalist. I write for the Kyiv Post and other places. And I'm an attorney, a constitutional attorney. I serve as director of Ukraine Story, which is a foundation for telling the human stories of what's taking place in Ukraine. But today, I'm here as the executive producer of Passion Project, shared by a lot of people who really love Ukraine, and that's Kyiv of Mine, which is a 3-part series released on YouTube presently, link below, I think, and 3 more episodes coming up later. So I'm here today as an advocate of Ukraine, who's, by the way, whose ancestors are from Lviv, and who is passionate about this issue, believing that this is the defining question of our generation. What takes place between Russia, Ukraine, and the West?
That's amazing. So your ancestors actually came from Ukraine as well?
Yes, from Lviv.
Mm-hmm.
And they were chased by Russians, and they were hunted by Russians way back then, 100 years ago.
Yeah. That's very cool to know actually. That Opal guy says, "Who doesn't love Ukraine?" Oh, right, fascists. Well, basically that's true. We will talk about that, but first of all, my dear friends, I would like to show the trailer, the teaser to this amazing documentary for you, and I hope that you will like it as much as I did.
First of all, we don't say the Ukraine. We are Ukraine.
Often people say that Ukraine, it's like Russia.
Ukraine? Is it a separate country? You're not part of Russia?
Despite the fact that Moscow would like to call us younger brothers, everything started from here, from Kyiv.
There's a Wild West element to it that reminds me of New York City in the 1980s.
When people from other countries come here and say, you have a fun country, we say, oh, really? You think so?
I came to Ukraine 4 years ago. I opened 4 restaurants.
I hope that my art will introduce Ukraine all around the world.
The first computer in Europe was built in Ukraine. The largest plane in the world is Ukrainian. The most efficient rocket in the world, Ukrainian.
We are a new generation, and it's our choice not to live the same way as our parents did.
It's still a Soviet mentality. The older generation cannot really teach them and mentor them.
Young people, they want to create something new.
We became less afraid of the future. Kyiv is safer than Chicago or New York. Kyiv is safer than London.
Are you feeling optimistic about the future?
Yes, definitely.
On Wednesday, people just set up their alarm clock for Thursday to go to work.
I was not believing it. It cannot be true. And then my husband woke me up. Kyiv is bombed.
5 a.m. My boyfriend and I woke up from sound of the first missiles.
I don't know, maybe there are some rules that countries should make some announcement. We are invading your country, be ready, but it was out from nowhere.
You know, it is the biggest secret for all of Ukrainians. We don't understand for what is this war.
We're basically fighting a pure definition of evil.
So it's summer 2023, and all of us got used to living the life as it is.
Of course, when I'm hearing it, I feel scared. But it's for a few seconds, because I know what I need to do. In 5 minutes, we need to be in a safe place, but the life is still continue.
Initially, you're afraid, then you're just, well, all right, another missile attack. But on the other hand, fuck it, I need to live my life. All of us are tired of being on adrenaline all the time.
You have to understand that it's a new life. There is no return to old life. And of course, I miss the old one.
It's strange because a lot of our people dying every day. But I feel life in the air.
The country is still at war, but you actually don't see it in the small moments. What you see is people living.
I got engaged.
People stopped thinking maybe we'll do it tomorrow. No, we do it today.
People have changed here, helping each other.
Ukrainian identity solidified over the last year and a half.
We became more kind, much more helpful.
The world got to know Ukraine, but also Ukrainians got to know Ukraine.
My God, it's. I watched this teaser a couple of times, and every single time it's just so emotional because, you know, it's such a shift between the peaceful life, the peaceful life that you show in the beginning of this teaser, and then, you know, this shift to the full-scale invasion. And that's what a lot of Ukrainians think when, for example, they watch this video, because we had peaceful life. We didn't expect anything like the full-scale invasion to happen to us. But to me, it's even different, because when those people had peaceful life, I was deployed somewhere in the ass with in the ass of Donbass with like rifle running around like crazy in the tree line. And to me, this is not just the previous life that we lost and that will never return because the world changed, but it's like something I always dreamt to have. Oh my God. But if you could, for example, sum up this whole documentary in one powerful image or moment, what would it be?
I think something that makes this documentary completely unique is that we have a dozen powerful images plus, because what this does that no other film has done before in the Ukraine context of the war is it actually follows Ukrainians from 2018 to the present. So we see their smiles as Kyiv is booming in 2018. We see their horror as the bombs are dropping outside the windows of the same people we spoke with in 2018. We see them as they move forward and as they're just finding their strength and the will to live and hope in the midst of desperation. And so you have these snapshots taken in real time. Typically when people make a documentary, they go back and they interview people about the past. Different story here. We are following them. And of course, when this film started, we had no idea COVID was coming. We certainly had no idea that there was a full-scale invasion coming. But at the end of the day, what you're going to see when you watch this film is probably the most resilient, hopeful, practical, liberty-loving people presently alive on the planet. And you fall in love. This is a love letter. It's not another war film. Obviously, the war is part of it. It's a film about heart and soul, love, perseverance, all those things.
Oh. I'm losing words. You've been filming this story for 8 years almost, since 2018. How has Kyiv itself changed your way of seeing the world?
Well, to begin with, the team that's put this together, I came later on in the journey. I wasn't there in 2018 when the film began. I'm here now, and I've been filming on my own even before I joined the Kyiv of Mine team in Ukraine for a while. And I think if you talk to all of us, all the filmmakers that are involved in the process, we would say that if you were standing in the center of Kyiv in 2018, people were absolutely optimistic. They were excited about the future. And these people were on the cutting edge of a city that was, close to 2,000 years old, but was about to explode as a centerpiece of art, culture, education, innovation. The filmmakers come from around the world, and they, when they first came to Kyiv, everybody fell in love. Everybody fell in love. Now you go to Kyiv, and when I walk through Maidan, when I, as I did not too long ago, walk up into a boxing ring, and I talk to the folks that are boxing who were watching out the window as the bombs were dropping right outside the window of the boxing ring in central Kyiv. And there are 10,000 stories like this. People are sober. Of course, like you, Starsky, which is something I love about you, they find humor in the darkness. They find this sort of, I don't know, it's just this black, beautiful comedy, which is how you survive when every night you're running into a bomb shelter. When you've every single person. Here's a nation of 43 million people plus. Every person had somebody die. Tell me when that's been true in history of the last 80 years. Everyone has had somebody die. Everyone has suffered something. Every single member of Ukrainian society. That produces something. It either produces people that give up or produces people that are indefatigable, that will never quit. And that's what I see everywhere. So if I stand in Kyiv today, there's a sense of, what's coming next. We're enduring right now. We're enduring. What's coming next? But I have not met a Ukrainian in all this time that would ever give up. No Ukrainian is going to give up. And in the end, Ukrainians believe we will win. Russia will be defeated. And you see that, and that keeps people going. Starsky, before I got on this podcast with you, I was on the telephone with a wife of a hero of Ukraine. She's a good friend of mine. Her husband was in my house. He's an F-16 fighter pilot. I live near the base here in Texas, and I had about a dozen Ukrainian F-16 fighter pilots in my home just all the time. We would celebrate, we would sing Ukrainian songs, we would eat Ukrainian food, we would talk about the war for almost a year while they were getting their training here. Two of the men that sat at this table where I'm talking to you were shot down and killed. We look after their widows today. I just got off the phone with one of them. And, her husband died, 3 months ago now. And she has to endure that. But part of her question is, what do I do to help my country? What do I do right now? Here's a widow who was given Hero of Ukraine by Ukraine. What do I do to help my country? You don't see this kind of spirit anywhere. I think America has forgotten it. I think America can learn a lot from Ukraine. And Kyiv of Mine emphasizes that and brings it out. So I think people will fall in love the way we fall in love, the way I have fallen in love. And I have fallen in love.
Speaking of other filmmakers that work on this documentary, I believe Ron from South Africa is
Ronnie
in the team, right? Oh, Ronnie Apteker, yeah.
Ronnie is not just in the team. He is a leading visionary founder of the project. I'm very honored that Ronnie wanted me to come alongside and help him out, because Ronnie's vision is, I believe in it. It's absolutely extraordinary. And his vision is the same vision as all the other filmmakers that have been every different part of the process. I think somewhere in the past, Ronnie was actually talked to you, and believe it or not, I don't know if you know this, Starsky, but we have a quote from you on the cover of our movie poster. So something, and that was an earlier, I think you saw an early edition of Kyiv of Mine. It's changed a lot since then because the world has changed a lot since then. But your quote was really beautiful, and Ronnie holds you in very high regard. He's probably watching us now.
I really,
he's a great visionary.
I really hope so. Yeah, I really hope so because he's extremely optimistic, friendly person, and
Yes.
we met in Kyiv, and it was amazing. But when did you realize that this project wasn't just a film anymore, but something bigger, something alive, something living?
I think if you were to talk to every person who's involved, everyone would have the same answer. And the answer would be the vision that began as an opportunity to destroy, absolutely destroy the Borat-like false propaganda points that was coming from Russia, infiltrated the United States by showing this vibrant, beautiful, amazing country full of love, great cuisine, great artists, great technology, all of this. That's how we started. But I think when February 24th, 2022 happened, it became clear this was going to be a different project. And every day since then has proven that. And by the way, it's not done. We filmed 3 chapters. The chapters show us life before the full-scale invasion. The chapters show us life at the full-scale invasion. And then the chapters show us life in 2023 and moving forward. But we have more to do, because when this film is done, we hope and pray that probably between 8 and 10 years will have passed, and we will have taken us through this difficult time. Chapter 4 is this hard time we're going through right now, and the perspective of people during this moment when we're absorbing and waiting and experiencing life right smack dab in the middle of war. But then we want to show life after victory, and then we want to show the rebuilding process. So when this project is completed, we hope, you're going to have this incredible journey shot in real time, 2018 to victory and ultimately to rebuilding. And we hope that every stage is going to remind people that Ukraine is at the forefront of what's happening in the world today. As an American, I'll tell you this. We used to be the give me liberty or give me death nation. That's how we're in our 250th year, this year, next year, of our founding. Think about that, 250 years. And we were birthed because people stood up against what was believed to be the greatest power in the world. And actually, the army was very small that we were using at the time. George Washington led 20,000 men plus and defeated the British Empire. Nobody thought we could do it. The naysayers were everywhere. They laughed at us. They mocked us, but we would not quit. And we had a man like Patrick Henry stand up and say, look, we can't live under tyranny. Give me liberty or give me death. That is Ukraine. That's Ukraine. And if there's any nation that America should identify with, it's Ukraine. Now, our filmmakers in Kyiv of Mine are trying to reach the whole world. I'm an American, so I really want to reach America. But I obviously care about Europe. I care about all of our allies. I'm very deeply grateful for our allies. They're very important, the French, the Dutch, the Danish, the English. I'll miss the countries, but all of our friends over there, that's great. But as an American, I believe that if we miss the message of Ukraine, America has missed the soul of our identity,
It's amazing to actually see this association, because Ukrainians generally don't know much about Americans' history. Like we know general, events from history that we studied at school, but basically that's it. Movies like Patriot with oh my God. Yeah, right. But generally, besides that, we don't know much. We don't know deep history, all right? We don't know much about the war for independence and things like that. And it's actually amazing to see that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We have a lot in common in our histories, in histories of our countries, because we were fighting basically the powers that were thought to be like indestructible, undefeatable, and.
That's right.
And us and Americans, people who later became the United States of America, we both proved that it's not that. If you want to live, if you want to see your kids living in a safe country, if you want to see your future generations having a better life, then it's not about, either I go to war or not, or I'm too scared. No, you just fight for freedom, and that's it. There's no other option. You said that
it's completely true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was just going to add that. I was going to add that it's very interesting. Americans have forgot this too. America won the War of Independence because we had foreigners helping us. We had French soldiers by the name of Marquis de Lafayette and men he brought with him fighting the war for independence. We had the French ships helping us. We had the Spanish helping us. We had the Dutch helping us, sending us money. This idea that America somehow, can't afford to help our friends, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for our friends. That's why there is a United States of America. So I applaud the regime in Kyiv for the very hard efforts they've made to try to reach out to the world. Starsky, you and I both know we're fighting two wars, a battlefield war and an information war, and economics ties them both together.
Yeah, and you mentioned other countries that not only helped your country to become independent, but also later during the historical events such as First World War, Second World War, you were always helping each other. And basically this is what we should do if we want to survive as civilized nations. We always have to help each other and support each other in times like that. When France helped United States, then United States helped France to defend against their enemies. Things like that show that we can actually win and we can actually withstand any situation, no matter how hard it is, how much threatening it is. We can always win, and this is something that people often forget about when they say like maybe like you should give like part of your country, and maybe then there is a chance that everything will be fine. It's just. But DW, returning to your documentary, you said that the series captured the soul of modern Ukraine. What does the soul of Ukraine look like personally to you? Is it defiance, humor, heartbreak, resilience, or things like that?
Well, maybe someday you and I will do an entire 1-hour show on the soul of Ukraine, because I don't even know where to stop. Probably one of the most beautiful parts of my life in recent years has been being invited to experience the soul of Ukraine. There's a moment that I experienced. This was in Ivano-Frankivsk. And I recently saw a broadcast where a foreigner was explaining his experience, and it was identical to mine. And it was 10 o'clock at night. I was in the town square. I just wrapped filming for the day. And in the square, there were young children at 10 o'clock at night. There were teenagers, there were adults, there were married couples, and there were the elderly, all together, all dancing, all singing the same music. It was so pure and so beautiful, and nothing you would see in America, nothing you would see in the United States or even in Europe. And that soul was, we are family, we are a people, we have identity, we're funny. We're going to laugh about things that in the midst of horror, we're still going to laugh. I'm sure as is true with you, Starsky, when I've been in Kyiv in the midst, and other places, Lviv, all over the place, in the midst of air raid sirens, we always tell jokes before we head to the bomb shelters. We don't know if we're going to see each other again, but we tell jokes. When we talk about Putin, we always tell jokes. Even my son works with me. My son's name is Phillips. He's a remarkable man. He's 24. He does a lot of humanitarian missions to the front lines. He's a writer. He's been published in the Kyiv Post as well. Extraordinary man who's wholehearted for Ukraine. And, he'll tell me when he's, in the bunker areas with the frontline guys, everybody's they're very serious, but they're telling hilarious jokes. And this is how we survive, right? So that's something beautiful. Part of the soul, it's a deep soul, it's an old soul. This whole idea that Ukraine, and this is demolished in Kyiv of Mine. Kyiv of Mine absolutely demolishes the idea that somehow Ukraine, and it's Ukraine, not the Ukraine, that Ukraine somehow is a product of Russia, when the opposite is true. It's the other way around in a very real sense. So I believe that as more people begin to draw from the deep soul of the people of Ukraine that goes back thousands of years, and that understands that when you go through hell, absolute hell. Starsky, my organization, Ukraine Story, has one of our key members was very helpful during the early part of the war, who has actually arrived in Bucha. He was a former U.S. officer who then quit the United States Army so he could join the Ukrainians. And he arrived in Bucha within 48 hours of the Russian withdrawal. It was his job to try to find the Russian units, to try to help with burials. And it was like walking into a concentration camp. It was, to this day, he's a very strong man. It's almost impossible for him to talk about it. It was such a horror show. I went back later with my camera team to Bucha, and I'm talking to a woman, just to give you one example, and she's describing the horror of the green corridors where Russians said, go down this road, and they just mowed down men, women, and children, the rape of little boys, the rape of girls, her family members. And somehow in the midst of this like incredibly frightening discussion, she's still telling jokes about the Russians. It's how Ukrainians survive. And I think Americans can learn a lot from that. But behind it is a lot of love. I think Ukrainians love deeply. I think they feel passionately. They love deeply. There's a lot inside. It comes out in music. It comes out in dance. It comes out in conversations around the dinner table. And I've had a lot of those. And those have been some of the highlights of my life.
Absolutely. You want to hear my favorite joke about Russians?
Yes.
It's rather like a fact, than a joke. But generally, the difference between, for example, Russians joking about Ukrainians and Ukrainians joking about Russians is that in most cases when Russians joke about Ukrainians, they show Ukrainians basically, as you said, like Borat nation, like greedy, stupid, and like mentally impaired people. But when Ukrainians joke about Russians, in Ukrainian joke about Russians, Russians are generally dead. So it's basically like a fact. You've seen Ukraine up close. What is the one stereotype about Ukrainians that instantly makes you, I don't know, laugh, roll your eyes?
Yeah, sure. There's two, and they're the two sides of the same spectrum. Stereotype number one is that Ukraine is a country of endless fields with no modern cities and babushkas walking through the streets, and it looks like the 8th century. That's stereotype number one. And it's just so laughable. We take that head on in Kyiv of Mine, and we just show over and over and over again, not just the advancements, but the joy and the beauty of this incredibly modern culture. The second thing is that Ukraine is a nation of gangsters. I don't know how to laugh about this hard enough, because I am far safer in any city of non-occupied Ukraine than I am in New York City, like 100 times safer than in Chicago. Guess what our president is doing in Chicago? He's sending troops in. Is that happening in Ukraine? No. There are protests in California against our president. When President Zelensky found himself in a bit of trouble earlier this year, dealing with a lot of protesters, typically younger student types. Were there police with big machine guns holding those people back? No, they were in the streets singing and protesting in a peaceful environment, and guess what? They got results. So Ukraine is, apart from Russians who are killing everybody and raping everybody and torturing everybody where they can, Ukraine is one of the safest places you can possibly live in. So these two stereotypes, and in Kyiv of Mine, we just blow them out of the water, and we do it in a humorous way, so people will laugh with us. What's happened is that Putin is very smart. I mean, I guess you can question whether he's very smart, but he's a fox, right? And so for many, many years, he has poisoned key leaders within the Hollywood system. We had a film come out in the 2015s, which was a series of films from our Oscar winner, Oliver Stone. And essentially, Putin is the producer because he works right alongside Oliver Stone. And he was prepping for February 24th, 2022. because he was laying, here are going to be my arguments. We're going to blame it on the CIA. Maidan is going to be a coup. Ukraine is a backwards nation that doesn't exist. There is no such thing as Ukrainian identity. And all of these, they're all a bunch of gangsters and criminals. All of that stuff went into the documentaries to feed the Tucker Carlsons of the world and to feed the people that were part of this this movement within America, which has gone back to sort of a 1939 isolationism. And he's been doing it for a long time. And a lot of people have bought it, but it's an absolute joke. It's a complete joke. Even the argument over corruption in Ukraine is a joke. Is there corruption in Ukraine? Of course, everybody knows that. But it comes from Russia. It's because of Russian occupation or Russian influence from before 1991 and then all the way up for the next decade. And guess what's happened in Ukraine since Maidan especially? The Ukrainian people have risen up and said, we are done. There's less corruption. It's a different type of corruption than in America, but I guarantee you there's a lot of corruption in the United States of America. So if you want to look to a corrupt country, go to Russia. If you want to look to a country that is breaking free from the shackles of corruption, go to Ukraine. I had a Ukrainian sitting at my dinner table, a lovely gal who was making us some food for our pilots that one night. And I just turned to everybody at the table and I said, okay, guys, this is an American asking you a question. If you were to meet someone engaged in corruption in Ukraine, how would you treat them? And the woman just put down her glass and she looked at me and she said, well, we would cut off his hands, of course. And she wasn't joking. She was completely serious. That's the deadly seriousness about moving forward that Ukraine has. Again, we have that in our, not that story, but we have stories of that desire to move forward, which is part of it. So long answer to your short question. The whole 8th century absurd Borat-like babushka perspective, and then the criminal perspective that's come out in Hollywood movies and documentary films, and that they pushed very hard. And Starsky, I'm sorry to say that a lot of Americans have fallen into the trap. I mean, a lot. And part of my mission and your mission and the mission of Kyiv of Mine is to absolutely eradicate that toxic thinking because it's absurd. It's a joke. Ukraine is one of the happiest and safest places except for Russians.
I completely agree on that. I remember after the Revolution of Dignity, it became like so embarrassing to even think about bribing somebody or doing something like that, because after the Revolution of Dignity, Ukrainians finally achieved this opportunity to live proper European life like any other European country. And by the way, in a way much better than different European countries, because, for example, you can tell yourself, like, we have absolutely amazing IT services in Ukraine. Like, basically your whole life is in your smartphone. You don't need to like stand in most of the queues, right? Like, the number of queues, I'm talking about bureaucracy, is literally shrinking every year, and this is something amazing that we actually achieved. And corruption became like literally a cancer when people were surviving, you know, after hungry 90s, then into the early 2000s, and people were surviving and tried to feed their families and stuff like that. Cases of corruption, of course, were absolutely crazy. But on the other hand, first of all, it happened because of Russians. And second of all, now Ukrainians are asking each other, like, corruption, is it worth it after all those victims that we had during the Revolution of Dignity, after the Celestial 100 was born in Ukraine, they were killed by police fire, by sniper fire. Is it worth it? Is it like... is their sacrifice, you know, worth you fucking giving a bribe to somebody? That's just ridiculous and embarrassing. And that woman who said, we will cut their hands off, we would cut their heads off probably, not just hands. But for example, if you could, let's imagine, if you could teleport, all right, one skeptical American to, for example, let's imagine some MAGA movement, all right? If you could pick a dude from that movement and teleport him to Kyiv for a day, where would you take this person and why?
Well, I think that I would take him in the evening time to the town square where everyone is gathered and singing and dancing. And I would have him listen to unity like he's never seen before in his life. Incredible unity and clarity. Ukrainians know who they are. Americans don't at the moment. We're confused. Ukrainians know exactly who they are. And their identity has been made clearer because of adversity. So the one good thing if I can put it this way, and I'm reluctant to do that, but if there's one good thing that has come out of this horror, one of the worst moments of modern history, is the clarity of the people of Ukraine. They are crystal clear. So if we walk into the middle of the town square, and over in front of us, we see where the Revolution of Dignity took place. We see the flowers where so many have brought honor and memory to those who have fallen. And then we see the children and the grandparents and everyone together. This is a dream for an American who longs for a day when people care, when people of all generations love each other, where the culture is unified, where people feel safe one with another, where there is a clear right and a clear wrong. That's another thing I would say, is that of all the battles that I am personally aware of, and I obviously am heavily involved in the information sphere regarding geostrategic military conflicts, this is the clearest black versus white, right versus wrong battle taking place on the globe. It's not even close. You look at almost every other conflict and there are layers and layers of complications. There are no complications here. Russia wants you to think there are complications, but in reality, it's really, really simple. We're fighting for many things. We're fighting for the post-World War II international law order, which allows things like the tech boom of 2018, which allows you and I to travel throughout Europe, to speak to people around the world without living in a Soviet era type state. We're fighting for that, and millions of people died for that. The price that was paid 80 years ago was simply extraordinary, and we said we're never going back. But the allies of Putin want to utterly and completely destroy that. Well, standing in the square at Maidan, if we were to take our skeptic back, I'd give them a plate of Ukrainian food. I would sit them next to the music. I'd invite them to dance with a beautiful Ukrainian girl. And then we just talk to people and ask questions. And I think they would be different people afterwards because, you and I do a lot of work exposing Russian disinformation and lies. It's a never-ending battle because there's so much of it. But sometimes I think if we can just reach the hearts of the people with humanity, whew, what a difference that makes. That's why the filmmakers made Kyiv of Mine. That's why everyone came together and said, we need a love letter right now. We need a love letter. And I think it was brilliantly accomplished. I'm very proud of it.
I absolutely agree on that. We have a comment from Cheryl there in the chat. Send MTG to Ukraine. She seems capable of learning from experience unexpectedly. I wouldn't do that because there's a high chance that she will report, Ukrainian positions to the Russian FSB. Pastor Burns seemed to do a 180 after visiting Kyiv, Alvin Archer says, and that's a very, very good example because he was the one who called to stop the defense aid to Ukraine, to stop the financial aid to Ukraine. Then he came to Kryvyi Rih, where 9 kids were killed by the Russian missiles, and that changed his mind so much. And I really want people to talk more to Ukrainians, to communicate more with Ukrainians. Yeah,
it's so incredibly important, and I know that we think about taking them to Bucha, to the various places you just mentioned where all the children were killed, and I'm for that. I think those are good things. But once you start talking to Ukrainians in a truthful way, like from the heart, and you actually listen, and you have a meal with them, and you walk with them with their family. Where once they had many friends who are no longer with us that walked, it's completely transportive. Starsky, I covered the Paris 2024 Olympics for Ukraine, and I spent a good part of a day with Yaroslava Mahuchek, the gold medalist high jumper, and I interviewed her, and she's just an absolutely lovely human being. But the minute you ask her about Dnipro, she's going to talk to you about her coffee that she loves, about her coach and her friends. She's going to talk to you about her fellow athletes that were killed, the gyms that were destroyed. She's going to talk to you about the river, her parents, her dog. And all of a sudden you realize these are the things that make somebody human, and they're the things that I value and I cherish. Well, we have story after story like that in Kyiv of Mine, from the people sharing those kind of stories. And I just think the more that we spend time together and we listen and we watch and we observe, the more we overcome the absolute insane caricatures which have become prevalent. I think one of the darkest moments in all of American White House history was what took place between J.D. Vance and President Trump and Zelensky back earlier this year. It was an embarrassment for America. It was a horrible moment. But one of the things that came out was the galactic ignorance of the leaders of the United States of America on the most basic issues. If you remember, now he's not doing it anymore, and I'm really happy about that. He's had a pivot, and we can really be thankful for that. Where it goes, we can talk about that. But before the pivot, when he talked about Ukraine, it was just all a wasteland of cathedrals that have been destroyed, with stuff on the ground and dead people everywhere, which is not connected to reality at all. That's a small part of a very, very big story. And that day reinforced stereotypes to hundreds of millions of people. Well, thankfully, we're fixing that now. We're going back and we're changing that. We want to get Kyiv of Mine. And by the way, you can watch Kyiv of Mine for free. The filmmaker said no charge. We want everybody to see it, pass it around, like, subscribe. Do you have a skeptical, brother-in-law? Send it to your skeptical brother-in-law. Get it out there, because there's nothing like humanizing people to make a difference. And we see success with that every time we actually get in front of people.
Absolutely. One thing that I remember from that disgraceful meeting in the Oval Office was when J.D. Vance literally said, like, Bucha, that's like propaganda tour, I've seen stories in the social media about Bucha, and I remember taking groups after groups of journalists to show them the mass grave full of civilian bodies there. And I was taking them there for several days. There were already investigators coming from other countries, I think either from Italy or from France, and they were already working there, but still the Ukrainian government was like massively encouraging to bring as many journalists as possible to this mass grave in Bucha to show them the reality, because this was very, very important to document everything, And when I'm watching that conversation in the Oval Office, and like they start shouting at each other, and then when J.D. Vance tells what he told, I realized that the only way he will regain people's trust or at least some kind of respect, if he has just a bit of self-respect, at least, he should fucking go to Bucha himself and literally at least visit that place himself, or better, of course, apologize to Ukrainians, because that was absolutely, it's very hard to find proper English word to describe this shit. It was disgraceful, to say the least. And I really hope...
It was the worst moment that I know of in American history at the Oval Office. And I'll tell you an irony. This is how disconnected people are. This last weekend, Vice President Vance was being interviewed by George Stephanopoulos. And during the interview, he was resorting to some pretty brutal rhetoric directed at Stephanopoulos. And in the end, Stephanopoulos said thank you, and he ended the interview. And following that, both J.D. Vance and the president complained of how terrible it is to be disrespectful to a head of state. And I almost couldn't lift my head up. I thought, no man in American history that I'm aware of has been as disrespectful as J.D. Vance to a man of superior rank than himself. Zelensky's president of a nation at war. He's a brand new vice president, which actually doesn't mean that much in the United States to be a vice president. And his behavior was disgusting, sickening, shameful, vile, and at some point, I pray there will be a public apology.
Same here. Same here. I wanna see that. I wanna hear that. One thing that actually makes me just a bit more optimistic, after like months of observing the ever shifting agenda of the White House, is that finally they evolved from what they were in like January, February this year, and basically yesterday at the NATO meeting they were talking about Ukraine's resilience and everything else. And I remember so many representatives of that let's say movement of supporters of Donald Trump who were like very skeptical about Ukraine all this time, and basically the narratives that I heard, it was like well, okay, time to forget about Ukraine, time to finally, guys, we are sorry, but now America first, and now let's we will do our business. You just do what you have to do. I don't know, like give up to Russia or like die. We don't care. And now we can see that this situation changed, and actually the White House learned about Ukraine, learned about the situation. They probably found some credible source of information. They receive reports about the situation on the Ukrainian battleground every single morning. Generally speaking, Trump receives credible and like legit information about what's happening, so he can talk numbers, he can talk facts, and he says that basically, Russia is not achieving any significant gains in Ukraine. Russia failed its invasion. Its invasion is stalling 4 years, instead of like 3 days or whatever they promised. It's a different thing. And now it's very, very interesting to see the reaction of those who were screaming only yesterday, like, finally, we will forget about Ukraine and you will just like die. It's kind of cringy.
Yeah.
Speaking of
very cringy.
Speaking of war and speaking of disinformation, you've been in war zones yourself, but also you've been in editing rooms, right? Which battlefield feels harder, the one that is fought with weapon or the one that is fought with combating disinformation, with debunking fakes and propaganda?
Well, I think I want to attack that question with maybe a slightly different angle. In terms of which is the more horrible, I mean, there's just no way to describe the horror of war. There's no way to compare anything to the sacrifice of people that are on the front lines or people that are dying. That's beyond everything and anything, and I couldn't even put anything I have ever done in the category of that. That's its own thing, and it's the hardest, the worst, the most terrible. But in terms of frustration, let's call it frustration, there's a sense in which in America, the information war feels more frustrating than the battlefield war at times. And the reason is because Ukraine won't quit, and Ukraine keeps pushing Russia back, and Russia is unable to deliver on its hopes and aspirations of murder and conquest. And so there's a very real sense in which Ukraine has absolutely, I mean, it's like a case study in how to refute ignoramuses, because Ukraine has, what Ukraine has accomplished has defied every critic, every naysayer. And so the battlefield, which is horrible, it's horrible. Nonetheless, we feel a lot of hope, I think, even though there are times when we don't. This is something my son reminds me a lot. When you talk to people on the front line, they're just very steady because they're not swayed by what's taking place in the news. They're going to be here tomorrow. They're going to be here the day after, as long as they have life, and they're going to fight the battle. Okay, but that's different than the information war. In the information war, we have lost until recently under the Trump presidency. And when I say we have lost, I don't mean all of America has lost or that our work has been in vain. because we absolutely have made a difference. Like, for example, I have a friend that just came out with a film on persecution of religious groups in Ukraine. And that has, I would say, a strategic emphasis for American evangelicals that care about that issue. And he was able to persuade some of them. And that's a good thing. But in terms of the mass issues, like in terms of the overall information war, Russia ended up poisoning through podcasters like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, and then at the White House, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Americans were poisoned by that. Now that's beginning to change now. So, short answer, the battlefield is always the worst thing in terms of the individual. But in terms of the overall war, the information war has been the hardest to fight. It's been the hardest to fight. Starsky, think about this. When we were fighting World War II, we were all on the same side. It's like America versus Germany, America, England, non-Vichy France versus Nazi Germany versus the Japanese. We didn't even know who the good guys and the bad guys were until recently here in America, 3 weeks ago, according to the White House. And even then, I want to point out that the United States is not taking a moral position of right versus wrong. They're taking a transactional position, which is, we think Russia's going to lose. We think Ukraine's going to win. We think Russia isn't serious about peace. And so they have finally admitted to the obvious, what the rest of the world knew, what we've been saying, but it was clogged up in partisan politics and Kremlin disinformation.
Yeah, I agree on that. Speaking of art versus, let's call it social media, because generally social media today turned into like news outlets. In Ukraine, for example, I believe already like 5 years ago, we talked about changing legislation to recognize social media as, mass media, which is kind of crazy, but do you believe that art, for example, like creating movies, creating documentaries, can have as strong impact as, or for example, hit harder than, for example, social media and news coverage?
Well, I absolutely 100% do, and that's the reason why I'm a documentarian. It's the reason why I'm so optimistic about Kyiv of Mine. Social media today is dominated by rage baiting. People will give a 30-second clip, a 60-second clip designed to stir up conspiracy, to make you angry. That can be very, very effective. We can't deny the effectiveness of it. But it's sort of a lowest common denominator approach to communication, and it has very negative effects on the American population, especially. The TikTok world is not a more educated world. It's not a more informed world. That being said, we still need to use the vehicles that are available to us. We need to get out on social media to get our side of the story told. But when you're talking about really changing people's hearts, I need their attention for 30 minutes to an hour to 90 minutes. I need them to enter my world. So what we did with Kyiv of Mine is to break it down into 3 chapters presently, with 3 more coming. Each of them is around 30 minutes long. And you enter an entire world. You begin to have sympathies with the characters. Your questions are answered. I think I really want to give credit to every person on this project that works so hard in getting the editing just right for the final version. Because when you're done watching Kyiv of Mine, basically every lie which is out there, maybe not everyone, but the major lies have all been dealt with very efficiently in a humorous manner. But now you have your arsenal of what's right and wrong that you don't really get on somebody talking off the top of their head, on a social media post or something like that. So I've seen Russia use documentary films to destroy America. The Oliver Stone is a great example. That film, when February 24th, 2022 took place, that film skyrocketed in views on YouTube, like quadrupled, because it was being passed around as this is the answer. And people were told, well, Russia's trying to save the world from biolabs. Of course. And Maidan was a coup that was created by a second-tier State Department flunky. We know that because we heard a 45-second clip. So those million people that came, that was all a CIA manipulation. And Americans believed that. The ability, the potentiality of Americans to believe that the moon is made out of cheese knows no bounds. It's extraordinary what Americans are capable of believing. But when you take them into a documentary, which is engaging with cool music, beautiful images, and great people, okay, now they're in our world. It's why your podcast is so important, because you're talking to people for an hour. Now, I think probably a lot of the people that are watching you and I on podcast are already sympathetic. And that's good, because we want to keep them strong. But we want to reach the people that are sitting on the fence. We also want to reach people who are persuadable. There's some people that are not persuadable. We're not going to persuade Tucker Carlson. But there are a lot of Americans. You show them Kyiv of Mine, they're going to walk away and say, wow, that's totally different than what I thought. I like this place. Actually, I want to go visit Kyiv. And there's two ways to know Ukraine if you're an American. One, go there. The second, watch my movie, our movie. That's it.
I can sign under this statement. Seriously, you gotta either go there and see it yourself, or you gotta watch this amazing documentary. And by the way, so you can basically confirm that you noticed actually Western audience finally starting to get it, that they start to see Ukrainians not as victims, sure, but as complex, funny, brave, resilient human beings.
Oh my goodness. Ukrainians are not victims. They hate that thought. They absolutely detest that thought. They are laser focused on victory. And they are complex people, like all people are complex. But I think their complexity has a level of beauty to it, which is special, which is singular. Because when you have been through, when the whole world is watching you go through a horror show day after day after day for nearly 4 years, when everything is on the line, there's a beauty that actually emerges in the soul of a person. I mean, they either despair completely, or they become stronger, they become wiser. It's interesting, one of the questions that's asked in our film Kyiv of Mine is, what about babies? Ukraine needs more babies. We're losing a lot of fathers. We have a low rate of more children coming into the world. That has to be fixed. But a lot of people, would ask the question, why would you have babies in the middle of war? And in our film, we don't get into the debate on that. We simply show you people who are having babies in the middle of war. And they're saying, we're having a baby. We're excited. We're not going to wait. We're not going to wait for the perfect world. We're going to live our life right now. And we're going to say yes to life and yes to the future of Ukraine. And I'm hoping that I'll be around in 20, 30, 40 years so I can go back and interview some of these children that were born in the midst of war. I spoke to a very good friend of mine, is a international runway model from Ukraine who is part of the Paris runway circuit. A wonderful girl. Her father was murdered by Russians on February 24th, 2022. And she left being a model because it was dominated by Russians. And now she works with Ukrainian youth here. And I sat her down one day in Ivano-Frankivsk and I said, what's your big message in life right now? And she said, I want to have children. I want my children to know who the Russians are. I want them to know how good life is. I want them to remember everything and to never forget. That's it. That's it. And I thought, wow, that's so powerful to me.
It's so important to know these things, and it's so important to not only remember who Russians are, what they did to us, but also to talk about it to Western audiences, to other people in the civilized world, because it's so easy to fall into this trap, that Russia is, such a exotic country full of, strong men with like deep Russian soul, and then really like when you show them that Russians are bringing like donkeys and horses to the front line because they literally burnt all of their stockpiles since the Soviet times because they're so fucked up, and what they do to their own people, that's a completely different thing.
Crazy.
Let's talk about the end of the Borat era, all right? Because this is something I'd really want to mention. Why do you think, besides the fact that Russia spends between 2 and 4 billion euro every year on their external propaganda. That's just the top of the iceberg. Why do you think they are so good at feeding United States with lies and basically making them laugh at whatever bullshit they create about Ukraine?
I think a great micro study and how they are successful is when Tucker Carlson went to Moscow. Moscow is a Potemkin city. It's like going to the capital of North Korea, right? In your little Potemkin city, you have clean streets, because if they're not clean, you get shot. you have, government regulated grocery stores. You have fancy restaurants. Why? Because the oligarchs, the people who have robbed millions of people and who have murdered people to make millions of dollars, like to eat in those restaurants. So you have a guy like Tucker Carlson that goes there and he says, wow, this is great. I don't see trash on the street. I can go into the grocery store and buy a nice loaf of bread. This is better than America. And it's just extraordinary. He's literally walked into a Potemkin village. And that is how Russia has manipulated every part of the narrative, is they have said, well, listen, this is the land of Tchaikovsky. This is the land of the Bolshoi. By the way, both of which began before, the modern era, before even the Soviet era. And this is the land, but still part of the Russian imperial vision and dream, which continues to dominate. And that's all America sees. They see these little elements. And then in Hollywood, over and over again, what they see are, what they perceive to be beautiful Russian women. Have they met Ukrainian women, by the way? Question to ask. They see wealth. They see people super cool, dangerous, all this sort of stuff. And Russians want to be perceived as dangerous, rich, beautiful, smart, and at the cutting edge of art and culture. They don't want to be thought of as the people that went into Bucha and stole washer machines or shot little girls in the head or cut off people's hands. They want to be perceived as something that they absolutely are not. They're living off a legacy which goes way back in time. And even that legacy is not exactly what has been presented to the world.
I agree on that. When you look, for example, I don't know, Ussurisk, whatever, Kolyma. I was showing the guys footage from Kolyma, that looks as if it was bombed for like 5 years at least. However, not a single Ukrainian drone was visiting this place. But that's just the way they live. Oh my God. We mentioned, by the way, Tucker Carlson, that's something I want to talk about because, for example, we have this, I think that Ukrainians told you about this phenomenon. We call it savok. So basically, savok is like Soviet mentality. It's like that compilation of cringy Soviet style like pieces of culture, pieces of behavior, that Ukrainians and generally even Russians consider all that extremely, extremely cringy and fucked up. For example, I will give you a short example. Like if you watch all the Soviet documentaries, for example, documentary about like building Chernobyl nuclear power plant, like building that beautiful Pripyat city, you will generally see like some Soviet person, all right, standing like this, like they're in the army, and going like, here behind my back you see like beautiful city of Pripyat. It's very clear there is no drunk people. It's a city of future. And here on this side you can see the nuclear power plant being established. This power plant will make our like Western adversaries literally cry in shame looking at what they have because this is so good, And that's like the way they speak. In the army, okay, in the National Guard, for example, when I was in the press service, we fucking fought against this because when you, for example, take a military person, all right, and make this military person speak something, they usually, again, they stand like this and they go like, Okay, we have a military unit that is called this and that, and we have the lightest rate, the smallest rates of like deserters, and we don't have drunks. And you go like, dude, speak like a human being, all right? Tell me something. Tell me something good, like what do you have on breakfast today, all right? Things like that. Show us some soldiers, what they do, how they take rest, or how they train. And it's very, very hard to change them. But in Russia, they still have that shit because they still have this savok in their heads. They still have this Soviet mentality. And why I'm talking about this, because for the first fucking time in my entire life, I saw Russians literally turning a professional American journalist into a fucking savok. I was so impressed, I cannot even express this feeling when I saw Tucker Carlson standing in the fucking Russian subway and going like, this is Russian subway in Moscow. They don't have like drunk people. Everything is clear. You see, they don't have garbage here. I literally even heard, him speaking with this cringy Russian accent. I was so impressed. This is something I would never expect to see. Like, dude, come on, what the fuck are you doing? But it was so freaking cool. Let's imagine that, for example, all of a sudden, unexpectedly, like Sacha Baron Cohen emerges, because I'm a big fan of Borat actually, and he says, "All right, I gave birth to Borat. I can undo it. Okay, what should I do?" What would you tell him?
Yeah, I think we need Borat 2. And we need to come up with a great storyline, right, where he comes to Ukraine and he's just completely shocked, or maybe he reveals he's a secret Russian agent or something. I will have to think about it, but I think he should come up with a Borat 2. He's a guy that's I think I don't know, is he Israeli, or I know he's Jewish. And he's done some films in defense of Israel. But I think after Borat, it's time for him to come out in defense of Ukraine. I'm going to work on that. Starsky, that's going to be my next project, coming up with the right comic angle for him. We know he'll do anything. Sacha Baron Cohen will do anything. So, great idea.
Yeah,
I want to think about that.
He's a great guy. Actually. I would love to see him in Kyiv. I would be his tour guide around the area. I swear that would be absolutely amazing. Let's talk about what Ukraine can actually teach the Western countries. What we were talking in the beginning. What do you think Americans could actually learn from Ukraine right now? Not politically, of course, but generally. Humanly, let's call it this way.
There are things which overlap into politics. Here's one thing that America needs to learn, that there is a time to put aside secondary battles and to unite over the things that really matter. My nation is the most divided, certainly of my lifetime. We've had moments of division before, but this time it's a little bit worse because we've lost our identity. Ukraine has a message, and the message is, adversity leads to clarity. Clarity leads to identity. Identity leads to unity. America needs that badly. Here's a second thing. For all of this gobbledygook crap talk about Russian traditionalism and all of that, which is just the biggest, it's just lies, right? Americans are suffering from a problem of, our families are in decline. We don't know what it means to be a guy or a girl anymore. We're just all over the map on 1,000 different things. It's not that way in Ukraine. It really isn't. Ukraine is a culture of, men that are glad to be men, women that are glad to be women, people that believe in their family. There's differences of opinion and all of that. I'm not getting into all the weeds there. I'm simply saying it's a far more rooted culture, I would say, in things that the West has historically said, these are good things. These are good things. It's really good to honor your father and your mother. It's really good to care about your kids. It's good to care about future generations. And everywhere I go, people talk about their kids. They talk about their children. That's a beautiful thing. I'd like America to see more of that. So identity, culture, we can learn that. I think Ukraine can teach Americans how to have a better sense of humor, for sure. Americans need to get a better sense of humor. We get really uptight about a lot of stuff. It'd be nice if we could just kind of dial that down and laugh a little bit more. That would be a great thing. We'll learn that from Ukraine. I think we learn a lot about what it means to just not quit, not give up, to live with less, to live without things being perfect. All of those things are true in the middle of a war, and Ukraine can teach that. I personally, as somebody who cares about art, I think Ukraine can teach a lot about beauty to Americans. There is an aesthetic and a love of beauty and expressions of beauty in all different aspects of Ukrainian culture. It's in their music, it's in their food, it's in their clothing, definitely in just the way they carry themselves. Ukrainians dress way better than Americans. Not that that matters in the grand scheme of things, but I'm telling you, it's a reflection of pride in themselves, right? They really care about who they are as people. And that's something that Americans should be reminded of. We've forgotten some of those different things. We need to laugh more, learn from Ukraine. We need to be together as all different generations, laughing, singing, dancing at the same time, same music, same culture. It's good for the soul. It's good for the heart. Americans lost that. Let's get it back again. Let's go to Ukraine. Let's stand in the city squares. Let's eat at the wonderful restaurants. Let's talk to the Ukrainian people. Let's go on beautiful walks in the Carpathian Mountains and smell the air, which is absolutely magnificent. Let's do all these things. And I think we'd be better off as Americans as a result.
I agree on that. I can confirm so many things because when you talk about, for example, when I had this tragedy of speaking to some of the mega guys that were completely uninterested in, for example, history of Ukraine or whatever. They were interested in like, why did your president play piano with his penis? Which I had to explain that what you just saw our president doing with piano, that's basically what he's doing with the whole Russia at this point, right? Like that's basically the same. But they were like referring to Ukraine as, you know, this Biden's project of like liberal fascist gay country, which you explain people that Ukraine is so diverse. You want to see like a lot of liberal people. You want to see something like Berlin only in Eastern Europe. You go to Kyiv, all right, because Kyiv is absolutely free and democratic city where you can see anything from like marches of Ukrainian nationalists to gay parades and like nobody gives a damn because
Nobody
we have
cares.
freedom of speech. You want to see more.
Nobody cares. That's exactly what.
You want to see more conservative, for example, part of Ukraine. You go to Ternopil, you go to Lviv, you go to Uzhgorod, for example, and you will see all that. Like if you're running, you know, from this little gay rope, you run to Lviv to Western Ukraine. If you run towards some more liberalism, you go to Central Eastern Ukraine. If you want to have all that all together, you go to Odessa and also have like some laugh because Odessan humor is absolutely fantastic.
It's all there. And it's beautiful that Ukraine is one of the most diverse and eclectic countries. When I travel through Ukraine, one of the men that typically goes with me or has gone with me in the past is a physician from Unbroken in Lviv. He's a Muslim. He's from Egypt. He became a Ukrainian. When I work with one of our frontline friends who's been a soldier for 10 years, he's a Jew. He's been fighting for 10 years. He's a Jew. I said, are you a Nazi? He said, I'm a Jew. Are you kidding me? Every religion, every faith, every background, everyone is welcome in Ukraine. It's actually one of the most open-minded countries I have ever been in my entire life. Nobody cares about things that don't matter or that things that are secondary or things that are nobody's business. They just don't care. They care about the things that matter and that are the most important things.
I agree on that. And if you want to see a country where, for example, Jewish community together with Muslim community give blood to soldiers, that's Ukraine. Because in Ukraine, Jewish community and Muslim community are like this. They never fight.
Right.
They're probably the friendliest.
They get along
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and it's actually incredibly refreshing, and it was one of the great delights I've had traveling to Ukraine is the tremendous diversity of people, all different types of diversity that we've met and we've experienced, and everybody's friends. I mean, Ukrainians they'll fight amongst themselves, but when it comes to the bigger picture, one person.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so cool because Ukrainians are like, when we have nothing to do, of course, we have those internal struggles like everywhere else in every other country, like in Poland, for example. And Poland is also pretty much monocultural, by the way, pretty much like Ukraine. But in Ukraine, we have so many different. It's just so diverse. I believe maybe it's because it's such a big country, because we have more than 600 square kilometers of territory, and we have so many people living there. But at the same time, like, we are like one. And even though we are considered conservative, but at the same time, we are very, very modern. And that is something that I would really like more people to learn. You've seen both Ukrainian and American culture, of course, up close. Do you think that West underestimates its own needs for Ukrainian values, for example, like resilience, like the power of community?
Yes, right now, the West is in a position of arrogance. We have lived for a long time without a lot of suffering at the level that Ukraine has. We have a lot of wealth. We have the freedom to waste our time on things that Ukrainians don't have the freedom to waste their time on. And the result of that is that there's a sense in which we've lost resilience, and a lot of Americans want things easy. By the way, I love my country. I love my country, and I love Americans. And I think sometimes we get a bad rap as well. But at this particular moment, the virtues which make us strong as Americans in the past, they're not doing very well. They're not where they once were. And Ukraine is actually leading the world. There's a sense in which I think about who is the leader of the free world today. I mean, a lot's happened in the last 2 weeks that might make people reconsider things. But the reality is the leader of the free world is whoever proclaims freedom to the world. That's the leader. The person who believes in freedom, fights for freedom, proclaims freedom, that's the leader of the free world. And in this sense, Ukraine is leading the free world. And they deserve tremendous amount of honor and respect. And Americans can learn from that because we were once clearly the leaders of the free world. And I would like to see us return to that position. But that comes from taking a moral stand. It comes from believing in freedom. But when you believe in freedom, you also embrace other attributes that you're talking about, which is love of liberty, love of our fellow men, an open-mindedness and a willingness to work with different types of people from different types of backgrounds. And as you're pointing out, and I'm agreeing with you, I think Kyiv and Ukraine is on the cutting edge of that. And I think you're going to find that when you watch Kyiv of Mine. I think our friends are going to see that, this diversity, tremendous diversity, beautiful diversity, and joy in the midst of the diversity, and core values that make countries great. How do you make countries great? Not by taking over other countries. You make countries great by being ethical, beautiful, artistic, exciting, innovative people. That's the message of Kyiv of Mine.
100%. And also you make it by actually listening to your people, what they're saying, which is the case in Ukraine. Yeah. In Ukraine, the power goes from the people and upstairs, because recently we changed the mayor of Odessa, who actually had like Russian passport. And
Yep,
he harassed citizens of Odessa for so many years. He was corrupted. Everybody knew that. But again, because we have war and we have rules, we cannot do much about changing the local authorities. And boom. In just about 1 hour, we had 25,000 signatures from Ukrainian citizens who said, like, let's just remove this asshole. And basically, his citizenship was also revoked, because when your country is being invaded, you don't go to Russia to make yourself Russian passport. It doesn't express you from good, good side.
Starsky, I don't understand what's happened to the American mindset. The fact that we're asking, well, why can't there be elections in the middle of a war when all of our men are on the front line and the Ukrainian Constitution prohibits doing that, is absolutely insane that America would be asking that question. Also, it's none of our business, by the way. Ukraine gets to decide what Ukraine wants to do, not the United States of America, regarding its elections. So that's just crazy. But guess what? England didn't have elections during the time period when they were fighting the Nazis in World War II. America had elections, but that's not a good comparison point, because America wasn't being bombed night after night in its major cities. Totally different story, but England was. So the idea that Ukraine can fight a war, which is an existential war, and allow Russian agents or Russian sympathizers to be in position of power is inconceivable. How would any rational person fight a war that way? So I say it's about time. Why didn't it happen beforehand?
Yeah, I agree on that. And for example, if you question why Ukrainians don't have elections, even though it's clearly written in our constitution that we cannot do that during war, I think it's also a good idea to ask the same, for example, the dude from the invading country who actually runs his country for more than 20 years. People are being born when the same old fart is ruling the country, and people die by being sent to the front lines by this same old fart. That is so insane. I wanted to ask you about those pilots that were visiting your place. When those F-16 pilots stayed with your family, what did that experience of talking to them, what did that teach you? And generally, how did it change your perspective, your mindset?
I think it changed both of us, both my friends who are F-16 pilots and our family. They entered a very strange American household because we had been fighting for Ukraine for a long time. So they didn't need to explain anything to us. It wasn't like any arguments need to be had. So once we figured out, and they figured out, whoa, these Americans have the same worldview, we actually began having very, very deep conversations. And the conversations were about life, politics, children, family, and they were about other things related to the war and their experience as pilots. I mean, collectively, they had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of missions under their belts already when they were here. And, I took them to movies. We saw a Tom Cruise movie together. We sang songs. We take out the guitars and sing all the Ukrainian songs. And most of them, or many of them, had wives and maybe one child. And, these are guys in their 20s, but they are the best of the best. And they make Ukraine proud. And of course, they have to keep a very low profile. I only mention the names of those that have died just because we want to protect their identities and everything. For me, and I try to talk to them as often as I possibly can through secure channels. But for me, it was one of the greatest moments in my life. I'll show you something since we're here. When they left, this is what they gave to me.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my gift from the F-16 pilots before they left. And that's a very special gift that I cherish and I prize very much. We talked about the future. We had conversations. If you go to my Substack, I have some articles in which I share some very intimate things which are allowed to be talked about, both while they were alive and my two friends who died, who were shot down. And by the way, their missions were extraordinary. What they accomplished was extraordinary. But they left children behind. Interestingly enough, one of my friends was married 14 days before he was shot down and killed. And his wife found out 5 weeks later that she was carrying his child. And one of the things you talk about, of course, is, well, what happens if we die? What happens if we were to give our lives for our country? And maybe on another occasion, I'll tell you about that. It's very tender, it's very sensitive, but we had conversations about how do we stand together? How do we help each other out? What do we do if someone actually gives their life for their country? A lot of joking. We smoked cigars and drank a lot of whiskey, to be honest with you. And those were great times. And whenever I would bring Ukrainian food over, of course, they were like, wow, yeah, this is great, because they don't get that here in America. There were some, just to show you an example of how Americans do have a heart for Ukrainians. There were two couples, one of whom was shot down, one of the men, his name is Max, a great man. He was the senior officer. He was a lieutenant colonel, about 30 years of age, incredibly wonderful wife. And one of our friends here in America said, well, basically we'll give them a house to stay in while they're here. So they didn't have to stay on the base. They stayed in a beautiful home. They were very comfortable, were able to be there with their children, things like that. And it had a real family type of a feeling to it. Of course, we watched a lot of videos together. We talked tactics, strategy. We talked all the things you might, with the caveat that they're under very, very strict rules as to what they can speak of. And they followed those rules to the letter. But insofar as we could talk about things in general, we did. And one man in particular, who did receive Hero of Ukraine, but whose name will not be mentioned, he was one of the Ukrainians to shoot down one of the first planes during the opening, one of the first Russian planes at the very beginning of the war. And he made some he set some records as a pilot that you've probably read about in papers. He's an extraordinary person. And I said, listen, before I let you go back to Ukraine, I need you to make a commitment. I get to make the Tom Cruise movie about your life. That's me. Let me do that. He's like, fine. So when this war is over, I'm going back and I want to make a film about these guys because they are extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And for people who don't know much about the Ukrainian Air Force, Ukrainians Air Force pilots have more experience than pretty much anybody in the world right now. They're on the absolute cutting edge, more knowledge. True, they're flying F-16s and other planes, but their knowledge base and their experience base is extraordinary. It's the top.
Absolutely.
I love these men. I consider them some of my dearest friends.
Absolutely. And Ukrainian pilots are basically our elite. What we have, they have the highest IQ. They are the most experienced because, again, controlling a machine that costs millions and millions of dollars and staying alive, it's something absolutely out of this world. Fighting the high technological combat is absolutely different from being an infantry. I can tell because I was an infantry for many years. So that is absolutely fascinating experience that you had back then with those guys. Because
and I feel like Starsky, I feel like I still have it because we're so connected as much as we can be. And again, it's not for now to talk about what these men actually have gone through and all they've accomplished. That's something that in the future, I think more will be talked about. But I can tell you this, I don't sleep at night very often because I have the air raid alerts on all night long. And when Kyiv is being bombed, that's the normal time when I sleep. But every single time I hear about anything that's happened to a pilot, I mean, I'm online to find out, is it one of my friends? Is it one of my friends? And when you get the news that it was, there are no words to describe that. There are no words.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Let's talk a bit about yourself. You are a filmmaker, right? Yes. But also you are a constitutional attorney and a journalist.
Yes.
How do all those experiences and identities fight or cooperate or collaborate when you tell a story about Ukraine?
Well, I'd like to begin by just giving credit to my father, who was my best friend and who was a principal influence in my life. And my dad was fighting Russia my entire life. When I was in a very young man, going back to the Reagan era, I was in sub-Saharan Africa, working on intel against the Soviets and the Cubans that were there. I did the same in Nicaragua. and Central America as a young man. So I grew up in a world where we recognized the evil of the Soviet and the Russian imperial philosophy. And my dad was involved in writing books on disinformation and various things like that. So my entire background is as a family that came to America because of Russian persecution and that was involved politically. My father actually ran a government agency for President of the United States. I actually was a presidential appointee for under George Bush when I was a younger man. So that I was always involved in this. And the message was fight for freedom, fight for humanity, fight for people, stand against tyranny. So there are three ways to do that. One is writing, the other is filmmaking, and the other is battling people in court. And all three of those things have converged in my own life as something that I feel very passionately about. One of the things I'm hoping is that 2 or 3 years from now, I will be able to be part of war crimes trials because just war theory is an area that I've taught before to other attorneys and judges. It's something I feel very strongly about. And I'm hoping that we'll see a Nuremberg Part 2 take place. I mean, right now it's just a dream and a fantasy, but I'm thinking in that direction for the future. The kind of law that I practiced had to deal with many of the issues that we're looking at in Ukraine right now, but applied within American context. And it certainly is complementary when breaking down the legal implications of how do we justly fight wars? What is the post-World War II international order supposed to look like? And why is it so important? As a journalist, I like to be on the front lines, not necessarily in the battle, wherever I happen to be. I like to be at the Olympics with the Ukrainian athletes. I like to be on the ground. I like to be where I can actually see things taking place as much as is possible. I'm hoping to be in Milan for the 2026 Olympics with the Ukrainian team at that time. And why Olympics? Why athletes? Because this is an opportunity for Ukraine to show the world excellence and unity. And every single Ukrainian athlete that stands up and talks is an ambassador for their country. They're defending the freedom of their country. And I think it's great to be there and to tell America about those things. The documentary film, we talked about that earlier today. Kyiv of Mine being just a great example of a surgical, strategic attack against the lies, but not just like an intellectual refutation, right? A love letter strategy, a love letter of the heart, the soul, the beauty, the excitement of the people. And I've come to realize that as important as it is to document crimes, we need that. Yes, that's all true. And to combat specific disinformation, obviously we have to do that. If we're not writing love letters, we're going to miss it. If we're not speaking to the heart, we're going to miss it. And Ukraine, Ronnie Apteker, a great visionary behind this process, has always said, Ukraine needs just a new story. It needs a new narrative. And not just Ronnie, but the other team members have said the same thing. And that's what we need to do, is to give a new story, a new narrative to Ukraine. We need to rebrand to the West what Ukraine is all about. And you're doing that on your broadcast. And even allowing us to have this conversation, Starsky, which I thank you for, is a big help, because guys like myself will take this, we'll share it with thousands of Americans, and over the course of an hour, hopefully they will be intrigued to say, wow, I need to give Ukraine a whole fresh look, a brand new start. I think if we do that, we're going to win hearts, and the result will be Ukraine gets more support and a lot of emotional solidarity. I want to see Americans go to Ukraine, more of them, influential Americans.
Absolutely, same here. I would be absolutely happy to see more people coming to Kyiv, and when we finally see Russia being deconstructed, to celebrate the victory together, because I still have that bottle of sake waiting for me in my Kyiv apartments. That is, by the way, a gift from a local legend in Kharkiv. There's a Japanese person who went there, and he's literally a volunteer. He's literally giving out food for people for free, you know. And my friend Andrew Mercado actually brought that bottle to me, but I'm not drinking yet. But by the way, we have several commentaries. David there in the chat says, this guy hated Russia before I was born. I love him, which I can only applaud to, because when you take Russia for what it is, when you understand what Russia is, I doubt that you will have a lot of sympathy towards this terrorist federation, and there's nothing wrong actually about it. I believe that our Russophobia is like not enough. But speaking of Ronnie Apteker, he's there in the chat, by the way. He passed.
Great. Hi, Ronnie.
Yeah. He passed greetings to you. It's very, very cool to have you here with us, Ronnie, by the way. I miss the times when we had
a real hero.
Absolutely. And such an optimistic and friendly person. I miss the time when we had steak together in Kyiv. That was really cool. It was summer. It was like warm days. Oh my God. What else? I wanted to ask you.
Starsky, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If you don't open up that sake is one of my favorite drinks. If you don't open up that bottle of Starsky of sake, I think Ronnie and I should meet you in Kyiv, and we should just drink it and toast it together. You may have other people, but just save a little bit for a meeting between the three of us, and I think that'll be a great time.
I promise. I think I think it won't just end with sake. I think, like me personally, I have this goal of drinking like a pig for 3 days straight because I don't drink generally, but I will make a big exception. Speaking of your work, what was the hardest day of filming? The moment you thought like maybe it's too much.
You know, it's the question in the context of Kyiv of Mine. If we were to ask, you know, all the individuals involved in the filmmaking, I wonder if the answer would be when the invasion began, or sort of the aftermath, when you stop and you say, what has just happened? Where are we? And people are running for their lives. Some people are running for the border. Other people are holding tight. I think those early months in February of 2022, it's not just the filmmakers, it's the whole world. There's so many questions. And you know, the emotions are, we have to acknowledge something that even non-Ukrainians, if you were in Ukraine when the war started, or you live there, it never leaves you. The horror, the bombs dropping, it's something that stays with you all the time. I was speaking in Kyiv at a conference. Actually, it was on the emotional well-being of soldiers. And there were about 500 people at this conference. I was the only filmmaker to speak there. And I was trying to explain why storytelling is so important to healing. Because if people don't get their stories told, their hearts just get all messed up. Their minds get messed up. But when they can have empathy from others, or when they can share their stories, it allows them to just kind of begin to move on and to see context, to realize that they're not alone. So I believe that storytelling is not only important for the people who need to learn about Ukraine from films like Kyiv of Mine, but it's actually healing for the victims of Russia. Let's rephrase that. For the people that are persevering against Russia. They need that. And everybody that's been part of Ukraine and the story of Ukraine, I mean, you're a little messed up. I don't know how to put it any other way. You're a little messed up. A lot's happened, right? We can talk about the glory and the beauty and the wonder, and all that's true, but you're still a little bit messed up because you've seen things that most of the world will never see. You've lived through stuff that most of the world will never live through, ever. How do you explain that to people? So those strange days, and by the way, those days were not just hard because of the horror of what happened. There was also an exhilaration that you remember. Okay, Zelensky didn't leave the country. That's good. Okay, we're driving the Russians out of Irpin and Bucha, or they left Bucha. We're fighting them in the streets of. Okay, that's good. Oh no, what's happening in Mariupol? Is it real? Is that real? Oh no. You know, and just like every day would bring something. And then you're asking the question, does the rest of the world understand what's going on? Does the world get what's going on? I was speaking to a friend from Mariupol whose parents were left behind there. I mean, you never recover from that. You never do that. Starsky, I was in the field of Mars in Lviv. And I was interviewing on camera a mother whose son died with all the heroes there in in the great industrial complex there. And he called his mother just before the Russians came in. And he was with his friend. It was just the two of them. And they knew they weren't going to be captured by the Russians. And they made a decision that as the Russians were coming in, they were going to do everything they could to take out as many as possible. But then they were going to kill the other person so they wouldn't be taken captive, because they couldn't commit suicide. So they would do this as a friend. And they gave the phone to the mother so she watched it live from Lviv. And I had the mother tell me the whole story and show me clips. This is the reality in Ukraine. These are the stories the world needs to hear. This is why the Ukrainian people are truly great. Truly great. Their stories need to be told. It's absolutely phenomenal. What makes our film Kyiv of Mine so very timely and special, it's just like taking a bath in humor and joy and brightness in the midst of horror. And it gives you the broader perspective that we need. So I would just say to all of you, all the folks that are listening, go today, go right now, get off this broadcast, go to our YouTube channel, which Starsky's put below, subscribe, like, watch the sizzle first, watch the trailer, and then take your time and go through chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. And if you like it, let us know about that, because we want to tell other people so that we can have 1 million people over the next couple of months watch this film, because there needs to be hope and there needs to be a little bit of happiness. And because when I hear stories like this woman who watched her son die over video, I want everyone to understand what this sacrifice and this perseverance is really all about, and what makes the Ukrainian identity so completely unique in the world today.
You said that you lost quite a few close friends during this war. How do you balance the grief and purpose while making something that is meant to inspire, like this documentary?
When you lose somebody, it shuts you down for a while. I mean, you can't think for a couple of weeks. For me, I'm a kind of a person who's like a fixer. I like to, if something's going wrong, I want to try to fix a problem for somebody, personally. When my friends were shot down and killed, I wanted to help their widows by providing them with whatever I possibly could, especially encouragement and love for the whole family and for the children. And you don't think of it. Your life gets, you just stop. But my perspective is that the worse things are, the harder we work. And the more we have challenges, the more we have to translate that into action. And we can't just stop and be paralyzed forever. You need a time to grieve. That's true. But you also have to take action. And so Russia motivates me a lot because the evil is at such a level. It's so diabolical. It's so wicked. It's so bad. Starsky, let me tell you a problem I have as a filmmaker. This is a real problem. People can only handle so much. It's like walking into a concentration camp after World War II. Most people couldn't handle that. And hearing the stories about it was too much for a lot of people, even though they needed to hear the stories. If you really understood what took place in Bucha and many other places like Bucha, not a lot of people can handle that. It's absolutely, the evil is at a level which is beyond belief. And this is why Russia can and must be defeated. And then the Russians must be brought to justice. So we fight harder. That's it. You feel pain, you see horror, you either become catatonic and do nothing, or you walk away, and that's not me. I don't believe in that. I hate that, actually. Or you just say, I'm going to fight harder. That's my mission right now. And that's why, by the way, we're just intense about getting Kyiv of Mine out to people, because it's 3 chapters are done, and they're life-changing, absolutely life-changing. So mission now, let's get them to millions of people. They need that hope, encouragement, and perspective.
I agree. I wanted to ask you this. You already mentioned that you are looking forward to making the 4th chapter right after the war. after the victory
And
and
fifth
show.
and 6th.
Yes. Can you talk more about? Can you talk more about that? I understand that it's like a bit too early, and generally Ukrainians don't like to talk about things like what will you do after the victory. Guys, let's survive until the victory. Yeah, but we gotta have plans. All right. So what's your plans?
Yeah. Well, here again, I want to defer to the team that has been debating this now for 8 years, and you constantly reassess and reevaluate as there's new information as you look at things. But I expect that, like for the next chapter, for example, we really want the world to understand what this particular moment is like, because this is actually a moment that requires a tremendous amount of patience. It's a hard moment. It feels odd at times, the progress where we are in the war and not knowing what the next step is. You'll go back to 2023 and you remember, Ukraine was getting money from Biden. It was on the world was unifying around it. And then things really took a dramatic change. And while for the frontline soldier, his mission is still clear, there was a time when you talked about America and Ukraine, and Ukrainians, all they said was, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're so grateful. We love America. Thank you. And now it's like, what is going on with you people in America? We don't understand. What is going on with you? And at the same time, I will tell you, I still feel tremendous respect as an American. I feel like I get more respect than maybe we deserve at this particular moment of time. But all of that's taking place in the mind of people and the wear and tear. When you're hitting 4 years of war, you have endured a lot. So we want to tell that story properly. Now, I haven't talked to the other filmmakers about this, but I'll just give you my own perspective. I've done a lot of World War II documentaries. In fact, I have a series that recently ran in Poland that I did a couple of years ago. And one of the chapters of the series I did on World War II was about what was victory like. So I actually did a 30-minute episode on that very subject as it applies to World War II. And it was one of the most fun chapters I ever made because it was about absolute ecstatic joy, the complete joy, and the sense of relief. It's like beyond belief when you actually have real victory against the enemy. Now, you'll remember when Russia had victory in World War II, they marched into Berlin and created one of the greatest rape events in the history of the world. Russians murdered, raped, and destroyed the people of Berlin. And it's something that we try to explain to Americans is that the Russian military is a rape culture. And it's not limited to girls. It's the boys, it's the elderly. They are a rape culture. And it's not just a sexual deviancy, it's also a form of conquest and perversion, and all sorts of things are all wrapped up into that. But that is the Russian mentality. When Ukraine wins, it's not going to look anything like that. It's going to look more like what it looked like for Americans after the Second World War. We hope, which is, okay, we won. Now it's time to build the society we want to have. It's time to forever be done with corruption and to build the world that we want to have. And one of the things I'm hoping is that that Ukrainians will get a lot of good advice and insight from people that truly care and understand the Ukrainian dynamic and will be there for them. I don't know what that will be chapter 5, I believe, of the Kyiv of Mine series. I don't know how that's going to pan out because it hasn't happened yet, but I expect it will be a really joyful and exciting victory story, and then it will probably be a very thoughtful and hopeful, let's look into the future, how do we rebuild Ukraine? That is the question mark, right, Starsky? What's going to happen after the war? That's the question mark. Because wouldn't it be a horrible thing if we fought so long and we fought so hard and we had so many die and we throw it all away to politics? We don't want that to happen. So we're going to need great people to rise up and really be part of the rebuilding of Ukraine. They need to have a clear sense of the Ukrainian identity, the Ukrainian vision, and there needs to be time to flesh out what is the Ukrainian vision for the future. So I hope to be around for that. I'm an American, I'm not a Ukrainian, but I hope to be around at least to watch it and to encourage people for the highest and the best objectives.
Thank you so much. And we have a question from Cheryl there in the chat. Was DW a JAG? J-A-G. How does he feel about the dismissal of the JAGs from the Pentagon?
I was not a JAG. I almost became a JAG. Well, I was in Reserve Officer Training Corps, but I didn't go further than that in the United States. The work that I did was in other ways, helping the president through other channels and means back during the Reagan years and the early Bush years. But I think that the dismissal of the JAG officers is ridiculous. I think it's part of a really unfortunate approach that's being taken place of political retribution, which is happening in America, which once again reminds us that America has no business criticizing Ukraine for internal problems when we have our own problems, which are very significant with respect to how we're conducting our own inside business. So it's a concern. There are a lot of concerns right now about the rise of heavy-handedness and limitations on diversity of opinions and political speech. Having said that, I do want to acknowledge the fact that we had problems under Biden that were massive. So it's not like, all of a sudden we have problems with Trump. Not true at all. We had major problems under Biden, and now we have problems under Donald Trump. And America will be here. And just as when Zelensky is gone or whoever the next person, Ukraine is going to persevere. Ukraine is bigger than your president. America is bigger than our presidents. And we always need to remember that. But yes, I'm horrified by a lot of the things that are happening. And sometimes I wish I could pick up the phone and call the leadership in Washington and say, what are you guys thinking? Please reconsider. One thing, Starsky.
Okay, yeah.
One thing we should point out. Remember, Biden never wanted tomahawks or anything to pierce the border of Russia. Now Trump is talking about that as a possibility. So whatever criticisms you have of Trump, many of which I'm sure are very valid, let's keep in mind that something's happening right now, and I want to take it. So if we're serious, if he's even considering getting tomahawks to Ukraine, we want that. We want to encourage that. We want him to be having that fresh new approach to things. And by the way, Pete Hegseth, who it's been hard as an American watching him as Secretary of War. I think that's the nicest way I can put it. It's been very hard. But yesterday he had a broadcast and he said that he was thinking about being part of the War Department getting tomahawks to Ukraine as well. So apparently the message is trickling down even to the Department of War, and I'll take it. I welcome that. I'm glad for that. Let's see more of that. But no, not a great idea dismissing the JAG Corps.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you this. The recent shift in the rhetorics of the White House compared to what we heard like 5 months ago and what we're hearing now. Why does it happen? And your opinion does this sound encouraging to you personally?
Thank you for asking that. I've just written an article on the subject. You can read it on my Substack for those that would like to. But there are 5 reasons, in my opinion, why this has happened. The first reason is the recognition of the Russian implosion. When Trump went to Europe, he met with the king, met with Zelensky. For the very first time, I don't know who was talking to him. I don't know how they communicated it, but it became very clear that Russia is dying economically, that they are making very limited gains. I mean, look where they are today versus where they were in 2022 on the battlefield. As Trump pointed out in his official message, after nearly 4 years, they're simply not winners anymore. The idea of the invincible Russia simply is not sustainable. And for the very first time, Trump appears to get it. At least he's vocalizing that. And you remember his exact statement was, after studying this, after learning more, I have come to the conclusion that Russia is not, and basically what he was saying, they're not the winner that I thought that they were. Ukraine is not the country which isn't holding cards, which I once accused them to be. So what's happening in Russia? You have economic implosion, you have oil fields which are being destroyed. No part of Russia is safe anymore. Ukrainian, ever since Operation Spider's Web, it's clear to the entire world that there is no place in all of Russia which is free from very cheap Ukrainian technology, demilitarizing tools which are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That is a game changer. That is absolutely phenomenal. And even more phenomenal is the fact that Russians aren't safe, and the Kremlin can't make them safe. Even Moscow isn't safe. So that Russian implosion is a big message. Second thing is Putin's overreach. I mean, you can only blow up EU ambassadorial delegations so many times, and American businesses so many times, and violate Polish airspace with shaheeds so many times, and try to target the president of the EU so many times, and continue to conduct hybrid warfare against the West and Europe so many times before finally somebody says, oh, wait, maybe Putin isn't our friend after all. And somehow Trump got the memo on that. The third thing is that beginning in May, there was a shift in Republican dynamics. And between May of 2025, there has been a 14% increase, up over 70% of Republicans now in leadership who believe that America should arm, help, or sanction further Russia. Now, that is a total game changer, because you'll remember that for the last year when Trump was running for office, everything was opposition to that. So that's the third thing that has happened. The fourth thing, I think, which has happened that we have to acknowledge is that there are massive divisions within the MAGA movement. So the MAGA movement now is split. It's split on the Epstein files. It's split on Ukraine and Russia. It's split on the murder of Charlie Kirk. It's split on Trump's decision to bomb Iran. It's split definitely on Israel. So you have people that are split, and it's violently split. And with that particular split, Trump is less concerned, it appears, to cater to the hard woke right. And he appears to be more open to his sort of a newfound look at his global role. Will it last? Your guess is as good as mine. But my point is, his motivation doesn't have to be right, and it may not even last. Let's take it right now because it's very, very important. So those factors, I think, have contributed. I see it as a good thing. I don't think it's trustworthy, but I think it's good, and I think we should take advantage of it right now to reshape the narrative.
Absolutely. We have a commentary from Keltenberg. That's about when we non-MAGA Republicans started pushing back. And I know that actually a lot of Republicans, not necessarily non-MAGA Republicans, but also MAGA Republicans, they support Ukraine. I've seen a lot of visitors, for example, in places like HOSTOMEL Volunteers who were supporters of Donald Trump, and they brought us different meds and different equipment for the front lines. So it's very, very interesting to hear that. I have a different type of question, though. So recently, Trump announced that he is going to meet with Putin, otherwise known as Huilo around the world, in Budapest, right, in Hungary. How will Putin, in your opinion, go to Budapest if Budapest is literally surrounded by European countries without getting arrested? Because it's so easy. Like, he cannot fly over Poland, for example, because he will get intercepted. There's like a whole Hague trial waiting for him. Like, I believe they already prepared a cell. How is it even possible?
The first thing I'll say is I do not believe for 1 second Putin will go to Budapest. I think this is all talk and language and manipulation to buy him more time. So part one is I do not believe he will go. I could be wrong, but my sense is this is another tactic. Secondarily, we have a really bad guy in Hungary. I've been to Hungary. I did some filming in Hungary in 2023, and Orban is a really bad guy. I don't know how to emphasize that strongly enough. He is not a friend of freedom. Fico is not a friend of freedom. And between Slovakia and Hungary, we have trouble. Unfortunately, Trump is a little bit enamored by Orban, because he's perceived as like a MAGA person in Hungary, but he's just a bad guy, and he's a criminal in his own way. I think you're right, but we also have to acknowledge the fact that NATO and NATO countries, I don't know if they would actually arrest Putin. They should. Of course they should. but I don't know that they would. And probably if Trump called him up and said, leave him alone as he's flying in or something like that, I could see a lot of weird things happening behind the scenes. But I still don't think Putin's going to go. I think this is manipulation. That's my opinion.
Sounds wise, because I don't see him like flying over European territory at all. One of the interesting thoughts that I read today actually was that Trump is actually mad. That's something that I want to know your opinion about. Trump is actually mad because a lot of media, for example, presented their meeting in Alaska as actually Putin's triumph, and that is something that makes Trump absolutely mad and angry about that, because it was supposed to be the other way around, right? Do you think that we will see something different if Budapest actually happens, or we will see like the same stuff, Putin trying to strap on everybody, like he usually tries to do?
It's a great question. Well, let's begin with just a comment about the Alaska summit. I can think of few greater humiliations and betrayals of the American identity than having United States Armed Service members on their knees rolling out a red carpet for a mass murderer. It was a time of tremendous shame for America. And Trump didn't get that memo. He was thinking completely differently. But certainly following that, given the tremendous escalation of Putin's activities, Putin had just constantly trying to test the West boundaries after the Alaska summit. Somebody finally got to Trump, and intelligently they played upon one of Trump's weaknesses. And Trump doesn't want to be thought of as a weak man. He doesn't want to be thought of as somebody who's being taken advantage of. And yet that's exactly what happened. Putin played him like a fiddle, to use an American expression. And I think he heard it enough times, even when he was in Europe, that he started believing it. Putin took advantage of me. I think that's what he ended up thinking, or at least whether Putin did or not in his mind, if the perception is that Putin did, that perception is strong enough. So my guess is if they are actually to meet, it wouldn't be all hugs and kisses and, apple pies the way it was in Alaska. I think it might be a little bit different. We would simply hope that Trump didn't go back on his reflex, which is to always talk about Putin being his friend, who he can influence, and having this great respect. The critical thing is, if Trump believes Putin is a loser, he's going to act differently. If he believes Putin is a winner, he'll act one way. A loser, he'll act another way. And right now he said he thinks Putin is a loser. At the end of the day, we're speculating. Let's see what happens in the upcoming weeks.
Absolutely. We are speculating a lot nowadays. We're literally betting. We're literally making bets on whether the Tomahawks actually arrive to Ukraine or not. What is your opinion on that? Like, will we see them actually flying at Russian oil refineries? And will we see not just like 10 Tomahawks, but literally hundreds of them flying at Russian oil refineries and Russian power stations?
Well, my first question is, why did it take so long for the Patriots to arrive? Where are they? Are there more coming? It seems like things that should happen. I was listening to Preston Stewart, another great broadcaster today, and he was just asking the obvious question, which is why the greatest, most militarily advanced country in the world is having such a hard time getting what we promised to get to Ukraine to begin with. And that really concerns me. That really concerns me. The answer on the Tomahawks is very simple. If Trump commits to it and really commits, and it's not simply just words, they will arrive because they can come quickly. I still don't know what to believe. I wish I could tell you I thought, oh yes, it's going to happen, or it'll never happen. But everything is so volatile. And the world has changed even a little bit more after the events that took place in Israel and Gaza over this last week in terms of how Trump sees himself. I think what was both humorous and also interesting about Hegseth's statement in the last 24 hours was that there was a bit of an acknowledgement that one of the ways to get Russia to the table is to equip Ukraine with what they needed for victory. That's not language we've heard before from Hegseth or from Trump. But something has happened where they're talking that way now. I just don't know if it'll last 2 weeks. I hope it will.
I agree because, of course, he said that, first of all, Europe should buy more weapons for Ukraine from the United States. He basically said, he talked about Ukraine's resilience, but he left some kind of hint that something is actually like being planned, regarding the Rushka. And this is something very, very intriguing. I'm trying to decipher it. I have no idea. Maybe you have ideas.
I think a critical thing to understand in terms of the geostrategic dialectic is that when Trump was anticipating that Putin wants peace, and you and I were laughing at that thought, we were just like, how could he possibly think that? But Trump thought, well, I'll get Putin to some sort of a deal. Now that he doesn't think that Putin has a deal, the paradigm it may have, we hope, shifted to thinking, okay, well, if I can't bring an end by pressuring Putin into peace, then I can equip Ukraine the way we've always known is the only way that will work, which is by giving them the military resources necessary to make life incredibly miserable for Russia. And the very fact that he's even talking about allowing deep strikes into Russia, wow, that's some of the best news of the last 4 years. I just hope we go beyond talk.
Absolutely. And of course, if this happens and United States actually start equipping or helping to equip Ukraine, which is, again, the only way to end the war, we know that. There is no way Putin agrees, Putin gets convinced to end the war. He didn't start the war to stop it, and he doesn't have this in his strategy, to stop the war, generally speaking. But what kind of...
Starsky, I was just going to say something. Whenever we talk about deep strikes into Ukraine, I think it's important because we probably have a diversity of listeners that are tuning into this broadcast, and this is a point that has to be made. When Moscow, the Kremlin, does strikes into Ukraine, they're committing war crimes. They're targeting civilians. They're targeting areas which are prohibited. Even in a just war context, they would be prohibited. So every single bullet fired by Russia is a war crime because they shouldn't even be here. Every time they do a deep strike into Ukraine, it's a war crime, and it has been aimed at children, mothers, the elderly, non-combatants. This is not true for Ukraine. If Ukraine uses tomahawks, they're not going to be targeting private civilians. My dog. They're not going to be targeting private civilians. They're going to be targeting economic centers that are fueling the war machine, and they're going to be targeting the war machine itself, which is exactly correct. So we just want to keep that in mind, that there's a complete difference of strategy of deep strikes. And the Ukrainian strategy is not only the correct military strategy, it is the ethically just strategy.
I agree. And what I wanted to ask is, for example, when the United States actually start this re-equipping, rearming Ukraine with what we need, people in the chat say, woof, woof. We are big animal lovers here in this on this channel. Yeah. So what kind of response can we actually expect from the terror Russians? Because, for example, we saw Putin, when Trump failed to receive the Nobel Prize, Putin was like, the Nobel Prize is given to people who don't deserve it, and he attempted to leak Trump's bottom in order to win a bit of his favor and stuff like that, because he's like an old KGBist. We all know the ways they try to persuade people. Can we expect something different now? Because I watched, for example, video, and I showed that to our friends there. For example, from this so-called discussion club in deep Russian S of that wasteland, where people were sitting in the big room with head of Trump, literally saying Trump suka, and they were like cursing him because like he's American and stuff. Will we see something crazy? Will we see, I don't know, like some anonymous Russian source all of a sudden publishing all sorts of Epstein stuff, related to Trump, or will we see some more hybrid warfare, exploding ammo storages on the American territory, something like that? Because knowing Russians, they will not just let that happen. They will start punishing United States instantly. That's just my opinion. What do you think about that?
So, well, to begin, we know that Russians always take a twofold strategy. One is to, on the one hand, try to kiss the royal fanny of Donald Trump through flattery and various things like that. On the other hand, to have Medvedev give some drunken, crazed, insane statement about nuclear blowing up Washington, D.C. And we'll see both of those things. We'll see intense threats, and the woke right will listen to the intense threats. They'll republish in America. Tucker Carlson will republish the threats and try to get Americans to be terrified. Nuclear war is coming. It's the end of the world. It's World War III. This is horrible. And then Trump will be flattered by how wonderful you are and all this other stuff. So we're going to see that over and over again. In terms of actual like hybrid warfare against the United States, of course that's going to happen. Of course that's going to happen. Will they release information on the president regarding Epstein? I don't think so. And it could happen, but Trump seems to survive those things. Pretty much, if that had existed before under the, when Biden had it, unless Russia has things that the Biden administration didn't have, you would think it would have been released back then during that particular time. And when the whole picture came out that he gave for Epstein's birthday, Trump said he didn't have it, and then it kind of died down. Trump has proven to be able to overcome all sorts of personal sexual attacks and various things like that, and people protect him and defend him there. But there's no question that Moscow will do something. I don't know that Trump is in Putin's pocket in the sense like they're holding something over him. We used to think that way as we watch things. But I'm not persuaded that it's that. I think Trump is just his own thing. And I think he likes heavy-handed leadership. And he admired Putin when he thought Putin was a winner, but he doesn't want Putin to actually make him look like a fool either. So the answer is yes, of course they're going to do something. Will it be over Trump? I don't know. I don't think it's Epstein. If it's over Trump, it's something else. Is Trump Krasnov? Well, if there's a time to find out, we would find out at that time. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I can already imagine Tucker Carlson reposting, those threats from Medvedev and Joe Rogan going absolutely nuts. Oh my God! Nuclear war tomorrow. Oh, Jesus Christ. Recently, Anna Paulina Luna, this interesting character, she published a social media post where she said that the Russian ambassador in the Washington, D.C. actually wants to share some classified KGB-related documents on the assassination of JFK, actually. And she says that it's like it will happen for the first time in history. And generally, what can you tell us about Anna Paulina Luna? Because what I learned about her is that she's spreading so much bullshit that she's basically turned into like, a local clown in the United States. Am I right? And if this even takes place, why the hell would Russians share this with her instead of, for example, Donald Trump himself? Because, again, they're talking about JFK, the presidential assassination, something as big as that.
Well, she is a very, very dubious character. I mean, she's extremely dubious. I think something I would say is that this is a game. The reason why the Russians would come to her or to anyone right now and say we have JFK material is because it's an attempt to undermine the Trump Justice Department and to divide the Trump community because there is an obsession, a manic, insane, crazed obsession within the woke right. And this obsession helped to elect Donald Trump. That somehow the government and the CIA, America is the bad guys, the CIA is the bad guys. They're at the heart of all the great evil of the world, according to these people. and that the JFK files will reveal this multi-decade, half-century-long plus plot of a small group of elites to control the world. That's the message that helped get Donald Trump elected. Now, Donald Trump never believed that message. It was just helpful for him. It was helpful that those people were saying that, but he never believed that. And now that he runs the CIA, he definitely doesn't believe that. But there is this division where MAGA is the spokesman for MAGA. Again, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Alex Jones, the list goes on. They all feel betrayed. And they're reaching tens of millions of people. So if I were Russia and I had that, I could, even if I didn't have anything, if I could cause pandemonium by trying to touch their tender spot, the JFK files, that's exactly what I would do to try to create chaos. But I mean, what does Russia have? It'll probably be a nothing, if it's anything, but it will set off the woke right podcasters to give them something to talk about and to get angry at Trump about.
Yeah, looks to me that way. I wanted to ask you something about. We talked about Anna Paulina Luna. We talked about JFK. Holy shit! I forgot. I'm getting so old here. Let's check out some of the comments. Yes, we have a comment from that I actually posted there on the screen regarding the Oswald, who actually was wannabe Soviet communist living in Russia before the assassination, of course. And why I mentioned? Yeah, I remember now. Because generally speaking, like take Oswald, the dude went to Russia. They fucking brainwashed him. He returned back to the United States. He killed the president. Like, you cannot be a good person or a decent person generally and be like friend of the Russian regime. What have surprised you? Like, what Russians surprised you with the most since 2022? Besides like their atrociousness, besides the fact that they steal fucking toilets and air conditioners.
Okay, I'll answer that, but I actually do want to make a comment about Oswald and JFK. Here's something that people should be talking about because it is relevant. The American who won Oscars and who created the film that helped to cause controversy about JFK and Oswald is Oliver Stone, who works with Putin, who co-produced movies with Putin, who is a communist sympathizer, who is with Fidel Castro, who did a film on Che Guevara. Stone is a gadfly, so he has a kind of different, unusual perspectives, but he's always been a sympathizer to communist elites, and he's buddies with Putin. So when I hear anything from Russia about JFK, I'm always thinking Oliver Stone and their attempt to undermine Western media by planting narratives which are just complete lies and distract Americans and divide Americans. So I'll just say that that's their tactic, and he has been critical, and the JFK thing has been very helpful with respect to that. What has Putin done that has surprised me? I think because I've been watching Soviets and Marxists, Leninists, and Putin for almost my entire life, there's nothing that really surprises me about any of the tactics they've done. I think it's all anticipatable. I think I'm a little surprised, just a little bit, at how fearless Putin is at this moment to push the boundaries further and further and further against NATO when he was riding a wave with Trump. Like, he's really pushed it. It's almost as if, I mean, he's pushed it from the beginning, but it's almost as if he walked out of Alaska and said, I can do anything I want, period. And no one will stop me, and no one will say anything. I can get away with anything, and I'm going to prove it. And probably doing that preliminary to the invasion of Finland or preliminary to something else that he wants to pull. So he's testing because he has much greater ambitions. But he pushed it so fast and so quickly, I would say I was a little surprised by the arrogance there. And but beyond that, there's nothing. I'm honestly not surprised by much that he's done. I think it's everything is KGB, Soviet Russian imperialism, and it's all extremely predictable. Every time Lavrov opens his mouth, I don't even need to turn on the sound. I know exactly what he's going to say every single time. Here's an interesting thing, Starsky. After Charlie Kirk was assassinated, the pro-Russian element went on the airwaves and they said this was a fake. There were crisis actors that were involved in the audience. Candace Owens did a broadcast saying that she implicated Ukraine in the murder of Charlie Kirk. And she said, you have Ukrainian terror cells in the United States of America. And she quoted a New York Times article. Well, the New York Times article she was quoting was actually about Russian cells that began in Brazil, where people were getting passports through a fraud and then coming up, of course, and planting these groups in the United States of America. So she called the Russians Ukrainians in order to get the narrative out there. But the whole idea that every time Russia or somebody does something bad, it's a crisis actor by the other side. This was Lavrov, what he said about Bucha. Oh, the people on the streets, look at them, they're moving, they're not really dead. These are crisis actors. And unfortunately, that works with a lot of Americans. It's really tragic to me.
I agree on that. There were Russian attempts to justify their crimes that they committed in Bucha, and I remember I watched myself so many Russian bloggers that actually talked in Russian about that. Look, that black bag moved, or that man with the bicycle, he moved actually when the car passed. However, that very man is seen on satellite footage, in the same spot near his bicycle for 2 weeks, and people are just incredibly easy to delude, unfortunately. And I was surprised that later the same facts, what they were saying, actually conspiracies emerged in the American internet, in the American social media segment. That was absolutely crazy. That is something that I am struggling to understand. How is it possible for them to be able to influence Americans so bad? Because, for example, I talked to a lot of people from the United Kingdom, right? And those guys, even they have, especially marginal movements for far right, far left movements, but majority of British people, they seem completely immune to Russian bullshit, which is something that I cannot really understand. Why with the United States it's so much different? Why the picture is so different?
America went through a cultural war, which was really historic over the last 8 years, where people have been polarized to an extent we haven't seen before. And in this cultural war, I would say both sides have behaved in very extreme and aggressive manners, which has led, and then the rise of the new podcast medium, where legacy media is not as influential. And you have, I said earlier today in the show, that the capacity of Americans to believe that the moon is made out of cheese seems to know no bounds. What we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, even longer than that, is the hatred between the left and the right. I mean, remember, our streets were burning to the ground in 2020 through BLM riots. Monuments were being tossed. People were being jailed. We may have forgotten that, but there have been extremes in America on both sides which cater to hatred. And in environments of hatred, people are open to extreme manipulation and to conspiracy theories. And the people that top the charts, literally the top people on the charts, are conspiracy theorists that have used Russian narratives. And it's, in some respects, it's not about Ukraine. It's about hating Biden. It's about hating Democrats, hating the left, and various things like that. And Ukraine is, the punch bag for all of that. But the result is they have been communicating a message of contempt for Ukraine. Will Americans continue to believe such nonsense? I think as long as we're angry and hateful and we set aside reason, facts, human conversations, that's true. And think back to the French Revolution. You know, the mobs were very angry at the aristocracy, and they had reasons for that. But they ended up decapitating 10,000 people in the streets of Paris through Madame Guillotine. But before that frenzy was over, they decapitated each other, because the same mob that rose up against one group ended up rising up against themselves. And whenever nations devolve into partisanship, bigotry, and hatred of such extreme, they start off with very extreme positions and they end up destroying themselves. I think America is on the verge of that within the woke right now, or at least that's there. And until we really have a moment of clarity in the future, Americans are still susceptible to tremendous amount of manipulation. I also want to say, Starsky, we're doing this broadcast in real time as events are happening out there. I just had some notes sent to me, and about this meeting, and I was reading Jay and Kyiv here, and a note that actually Ronnie sent to me a couple minutes ago, and Jay and Kyiv is pointing out that now that Putin has come back to kiss the royal fanny again, Trump is putting the tomahawk thing aside for right now, which makes me wonder if it was just simply bait for hopefully a new victory, in light of the fact of what happened in the Middle East, with him thinking, well, look what I did in the Middle East. Maybe I can do it with Russia now, which of course he can't.
I agree on that. You cannot convince Putin. You cannot negotiate Putin into a ceasefire even, and it's completely impossible. I really hope that he would understand by now that it's like a utopia. But first of all, I think we should really wrap out very soon, because it's been more than 2.5 hours of amazing conversation, and we had plenty of amazing comments. And also, thank you so much, not only for your amazing documentary and your work for Ukraine, but also for your perspectives on the American politics, because this is something that I am not an expert in, and I always want to learn more about that. And I can say the same about our dear family in the chat. Always cool to hear opinion of like a real native American national, right? A person from there, from across the pond. I would like to say big thanks, first of all, to the moderators that were helping us there. Ali, thank you so much, as well as Newman and Katya. Katya, I think she's sleeping, or she's there. I don't know. She's not responding in the chat. But thank you so much, my dear friends. And also thank you so much, everyone there in the chat, for asking your questions. And DW, is there a message that you would like to send to Europeans, to Ukrainians, and also to people watching us right now?
Absolutely. Number one, support my friend and my brother Starsky. It's podcasts like these that help to fight for the world right now. We watch Starsky in the United States. He's a hero to us. His story is a heroic story. Support him, help him, keep him going. That's the first thing. Second, please, today, watch our trailer for Kyiv of Mine. Watch the chapters. Subscribe to our channel so we can keep sending you new things as it comes out. And you can watch our chapters. I think it will move you. I think it will touch you. And then after you've done that, share it with your friends. People say, what can I do for Ukraine? Help us give Ukraine a new conversation, one with love, one with encouragement. Please, let's get the message out. The third thing is, I just want to thank all the people, including the folks that are interviewed, that are part of the Kyiv of Mine story, and the team that has been making this film for 8 years now. We need more people like this, in my opinion, in the world, that are working hard with no personal benefit other than just getting that message out there, so that there can be freedom and there can be more love in the world. The final thing I want to say is this: do not be discouraged and do not despair in this battle for freedom in Ukraine. We are going to win. Russia can and will be defeated, and I look forward to seeing as many new friends as I can back in Ukraine on my next journey, and certainly on Independence Day, when Ukraine stands free of all Russian involvement and the horrors that she has brought to Ukraine and the world. Slava Ukraini.
Heroям slava, my friend. And personally, I'm looking very much forward to having that bottle of sake with you, my friends. So that will be one of
I'll
my
bring the
goals.
cigars.
Okay,
Bring
okay.
some nice cigars for you, Starsky.
That's a deal. So that will be one of my goals for the observable future, because despite when I made that address to the Russian terrorists, like during the first days of the invasion, I received something like 10,000 commentaries from all sorts of Russian terrorists promising like to cut my head off and stuff like that. No, I want to drink sake with my friends after the victory day in Ukraine. I want to live very long and happy life until I'm like 45, 46. Like it's a very long life. So, my dear friends, thank you so much for watching DW. Once again, thank you so much, you and all the team who dedicated their time and effort to bring this amazing documentary for us, and also to the heroes of your series, because those people will be and already are inspiring a lot of people around the world. Thank you so much, and thank you, my dear family there in the chat. Thank you for supporting DW. Please make sure to subscribe, to share his video. This is something absolutely crucial to deliver this content to as many people as possible, and I am really much calling you to do that. Thank you so much. Thank you for supporting Ukraine, because this is the proper thing to do, and as always, be safe. Bye bye. And DW, don't run away. Okay.